Hello to the good people of Shepherd of the Lake and our network of family and friends. God's blessings to you this day. There's an ongoing joke about the fact that as a sermon writer and a sermon preacher, I come with a 10-minute guarantee. If I can't say it in 10 minutes, it can't be said. Of course, that's not actually true. Sometimes, as folks will tell you, my sermons go to 15, even 16 or 17 minutes, but I try to keep it in the ballpark of 10. That being the case, though, sometimes you don't get around to talking about everything that is important about the text. And that was the case, especially with this past Sunday. We had the story, two stories sort of sitting next to each other. One was about Jesus' rejection in his hometown. And then it's followed up immediately by the story of him sending out the 12 two by two to preach the gospel in the villages. Now, of course, those are both connected with the idea of rejection. Jesus comes as a prophet, but is not accepted by his own people. And there's part of that story, the sending out the 12, that says, to expect rejection. When you go out with a message of repentance, not all people will be willing to hear it and willing to accept it, and you will be rejected just as Jesus was. But there's a few other pieces of good information in here that we didn't get a chance to mention. One is just this whole idea of Jesus being rejected by his own people. This happens early in Mark's Gospel in chapter 6. And what Bible scholars tell us is that this is sort of the beginning of the theme that will lead to the cross. So it's not that Jesus was rejected all of a sudden when he was crucified, but rather his missionary work, his ministry, from the very beginning, ran into rejection and non-acceptance and people not embracing him as the Messiah. As early as chapter 6, even in his own village, his own town, people were not accepting his message. And there's a few reasons why that probably is. We see here in the text that they say, isn't this the carpenter? He's not a rabbi. He's not an official religious person. He doesn't have ordination documents. He's just a carpenter. And we talk a lot about how that word we get carpenter is tekton, which means a builder in wood. So he was like a construction worker. So he had a common job, not an intellectual job. He wasn't a high status rabbi that had the authority, the clout to teach about God and about the scriptures, and yet he's doing it anyway, and he's doing it with authority. That causes this situation where his own people are suspicious of him. Where did he get all this, they say. The other idea is familiarity. They say, we know this person's mom and sisters and brothers. They're here with us. This is a person we saw as a child that grew up with us. And so that even further throws into the question, where did this message come from if this person and his family have been with us this whole time? One of the neat literary things about this passage, which is 1 through 6, Mark 6, 1 through 6, is that it's bookended by amazement. At first, the people are amazed by Jesus. How did he get all this information? And then at the end, Jesus is amazed at their unbelief. He is surprised, shocked, amazed that they are so callously rejecting his message because of these reasons. In the verses that follow, 7 through 13, what we focused on in the sermon was this idea that Jesus first calls together the disciples, and then he sends them out as apostles. We use those two words, disciple and apostle, interchangeably to refer to these 12 individuals, but a disciple is one who learns, and an apostle is one who is sent out with a message. And so they become apostles when Jesus sends them out. One of the things we didn't get around to talking about was that Jesus tells them, take nothing for your journey. No staff, no bread, no bag, no money. Wear sandals, don't put on 2 tunics. Go out in this state of sort of unpreparedness. What that speaks to is reliance upon God alone. It sort of reminds you of the story of the Exodus when the folks were led out of slavery and they go into the wilderness where, as I like to say, God was all they had and God was all they needed. He's raining down bread in the form of manna. He's making the water appear from the rocks. And so they go out in this state of vulnerability, and yet God shelters them. And so that's sort of this idea, too, with the disciples. God is all they have and God is all they need. Jesus also tells them, don't move around from house to house. He said, whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave. And that was because what would happen in this cultural context was that if you came into a town as a preacher or messenger, If you started to do well, someone with more clout, a bigger house, better food, more resources would say, "Hey, come up here and stay with me instead, so that I can have the clout of having you in my house too." And so people were always looking for what we might say the bigger, better deal. Jesus says you're not in it for that. You're taking nothing with you, and you're not going to get anything either. You're not going there for what you get out of it. You're going there to preach the gospel. So again, a reliance upon God and not a fixation on what they're getting from this missionary journey. He also tells them that if a place rejects them, and that's that connecting theme between his rejection in his hometown and their possible rejection when they go out with this message of repentance, he says, if they reject you, shake the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. In this time and place, if a Jewish person went to Gentile territory, they actually would, when they came back onto holy ground, shake the pagan dust from their feet, because they wanted nothing of that pagan place to cling to them as they come back home to live a clean life before God. And so the sort of suggestion there is that by virtue of rejecting this message of repentance, these people are paganizing themselves in a sense. They have made themselves a territory where the gospel is not accepted. And so the missionaries are to move on and just to know that they have done their work in preaching, and that has been their role. They go out and they preach, and it says they cast out many demons and anoint many with oil who were sick and cure them. And so the idea there is that their missionary journey is bringing wholeness and healing. They're exorcising the demon-haunted world that exists outside of the good news. And we're to know ourselves as church as those who do that as well. We always have a mission. When we leave church, as we said on Sunday, we're never just leaving church. We're always being sent out to bring Christ with us to be his witnesses wherever we go. That is part of our calling as Christians. Rich text that we didn't get around to talking about everything important. You never really get finished talking about the gospel, but those are a few points that we are naming now that we didn't get to on Sunday. I hope that your week is blessed and that you will come and see me on Wednesday at 10 for our Bible study. And if not, I will see you in worship, and God's blessings to you this day and this week.